Well, guys, you're almost all here, and I'm glad you're here. Is everybody safe?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes.
There we go. Yeah, okay, good. You can hear me. I'm good. All right. Well, going into the phase of the course, snow day on Zoom. And I'm glad you're here. And I'd like to pick up where we left off last time. We talked about the High Renaissance. We talked about Leonardo, Raphael, and Michelangelo. And we looked at some of the artists that came along a little later in the century, people like Del Sarto and especially Titian. And I want to kind of recap High Renaissance before we go any farther. And High Renaissance, there was kind of a shared goal among all of the artists, the sculptors, the architects, the painters. That is that they were trying to reach the lofty heights, the goals, the ideals of classical Greek and Roman culture. We know that, they talked about it. And as the century wore on, we saw that a lot of their artwork started to take on the appearance of classical Greek art and architecture and Roman architecture and so on. That was their goal. And another goal was that they wanted to employ all of the knowledge, not only philosophy, but mathematics and science, optics, everything that they knew they wanted to employ in their art. So that's where we get the mathematical perspective, 1 and 2 point perspective. That's where we see the artists really dig into.
No, but I think I should be allowed a single day to predict
where we see them dig into science, where they dig into classical philosophy. So that was kind of the overall goal, the zeitgeist, the spirit of the age. And so that they accomplished all of that was called the High Renaissance. And there were some artists that kind of continued in that tradition, in the movement that was started around 1400. But there was something else that happened too. And that's why I have this screen here, mannerism. And this is kind of, how should I say? It's kind of what happens after High Renaissance. And they don't really share the same goals. They don't share the same methods. They don't really adhere to much of what happened in the High Renaissance. They kind of take things into their own hands and they do new and different things. There are a lot of theories about why that is. One theory says that the way that the painters such as Raphael, Leonardo, Michelangelo, the way that they painted and sculpted was kind of a secret. They didn't share their methods, their techniques. And so to some extent, the next generation was kind of lost. They kind of had to invent things for themselves. That is one theory. There is another theory that artists after the High Renaissance decided that, well, we can't top what they did. We can't outdo them in their depiction of realism. We can't outdo them in their fidelity or adherence to ancient Greek and Roman culture. We're going to take it in a whole other direction. We don't really know, but we do know art took another direction, and that was called mannerism. And so, Pontormo, Jacopo da Pontormo. I want to kind of point this out. For instance, Pontormo has some of the same skills that we've seen. You can depict human beings with some high degree of accuracy. You don't see the sculpted look that you see in a Raphael or a Michelangelo, but it is still reasonably realistic. You would agree with that? And the techniques for folds and drapery on the clothing, the way the light hits the subjects, that's all pretty accurate too. But there's something that's noticeably different about this painting. Anybody want to take a stab at that? What separates this painting from all of this stuff we've seen so far? Give you a hint. You think about composition. How is the composition different?
Jesus isn't like the direct center of this piece.
Yes, David, absolutely. As a matter of fact, what we had seen in the past is that there would be a vanishing point that was in the center. And as you said quite correctly, Jesus would be in that spot. What's in that spot here is this woman's arm, and she's got a rag, a towel or something, presumably to clean up the dead body of Jesus. So this composition is what you would call a radial composition, and that is that it goes around in a circle like that. And that is totally different from what you would see in the Renaissance. And so this is called mannerism, where they're kind of taking some of the pieces, some of the development, some of the theories of the Renaissance and saying, wait a minute, we can do this a little differently. And so, yeah, Pontormo, Entombment of Christ, which is obviously where they had taken his body off the cross and they're carrying him to the tomb. Now there's still a lot of similarities here. Like I say, the kind of depiction of the realism, some of, the subject matter itself is right out of Renaissance tradition, and the gestures. They always, especially when we saw Raphael and Michelangelo, these gestures, these figures are not stiff, they're very lifelike. And to the extent that this young man here was actually looking back at the viewer. This one here is kind of forlorn. Oh my goodness. He's dead. I'm so sad. Mother Mary in anguish. So anyway, this is mannerism, and this is one manifestation of that change. Another manneristic composition, again, the center being right here, and this actually ends up being kind of a triangular or two-layered composition. Fall of the rebel angels. And this is kind of a cautionary tale. And if you read the book of Genesis and a lot of other scholarly writings on the origin in Genesis, you'll know that one of God's most trusted angels was the angel Lucifer, who thought he could be God, turned against God, and he was cast into hell. And Lucifer is now referred to as Satan, the devil, Beelzebub, so on. So anyway, that's what this story depicts. And hell is really a pretty gruesome place. That's another thing we're starting to see during mannerism. Now, I showed you The Last Judgment by Michelangelo, and that is considered a manneristic piece, composition, painting, and subject. And so this is something that really starts to gain a lot of traction, the idea of paying for your sins, being cast into hell. Parmigianino, self-portrait in a convex mirror. That's really pretty interesting. Do you guys remember the Arnolfini marriage? The Van Eyck, woman, guy, little dog, magnificent chandelier, painted in Bruges around 1400. The one that David Hockney talked about so much. Well, you know, one of the ideas, one of the breakthroughs in Van Eyck was that he could do that chandelier perfectly. And another is in that Arnolfini portrait, there is a convex mirror, and it shows the foreground. It reflects, but it has a curve. A convex mirror, for those of you who don't know, it's a mirror that's kind of rounded and it's kind of bubble shaped. Now, there's another kind of mirror that's just the opposite. It's called a concave mirror, where it's just reversed. But this is a bubble-like kind of mirror. And so you can see the reflection of this. This is the roof line. That's some of the rafters here. And this is a window. But you see everything conforms to the convex mirror. Again, I'm talking about artists starting to do different things that the Renaissance artists really never wanted to go near. And so anyway, this is a distorted reality. It's very exact painting. And so Parmigianino, this is same guy again. Oh, here we go. Madonna with the long neck. I put a star by this. This is kind of considered one of the best, most classic example of mannerism. And that is that what you see in mannerism is, as I showed you with the entombment of Christ. They start playing around with the composition. They start playing around with the space, and they start to really play around with proportions. And so this Madonna with the long neck, still kind of a Renaissance idea that the Virgin Mary, the mother of Christ, would be portrayed as a beautiful woman. But in this case, she kind of showing a little more skin than usual. And the other thing with the long neck, that was something at the time, 16th century Italy, was considered beautiful, a long neck. It was considered to be a hallmark of classic feminine beauty. And so he painted her to the fashionable, the current ideals of beauty. Madonna with the long neck. There's something else that's going on here too, and that is the Christ child. Now look at this. This Christ child is exaggerated to a very high degree, would you say? Is really very long. And so the elongation kind of takes place in the Christ child as well. And the other part of this is might have something to do with some kind of exaggerated perspective, in that the Christ child is much closer and so appears to be larger. But at any rate, what I've been saying, the artists are taking some liberties. They're going on their own. They are doing new and different things. They're not so rigidly adherent to the ideals of the Renaissance. Bronzino, Venus, Cupid, Folly, and Time. And this, in terms of anatomy and stuff, I don't know, this is not quite up to, you may disagree, high Renaissance standards. But Venus, that's her, and you can see this is Venus, and she has in her hand what may be a mirror, that she's looking at herself. Venus, Cupid, this is Cupid right out of Roman mythology. Folly, and that is characterized here, and Time. Time is the old man. But this is an allegory. This is a cautionary tale that in time we'll all get old. After a while, you will not be quite as beautiful as you are when you're young. You will have, as you can see here, troubles. You see here, mask, allegory. You put on different faces. You become different people depending on the situation. All of these things kind of get rolled up in this kind of storytelling, and it's really highly dependent on understanding Roman mythology, but it's also, again, in terms of composition, in terms of how the characters are set up, and the way the allegory is put together. Not Renaissance at all. And so this yet is another Mannerist painting. And so sometimes, this is Bronzino too. This was, previous was Bronzino. And here he is painting Eleonora of Toledo and Giovanni de' Medici. And Eleonora of Toledo is a Spanish woman. She married into the Medici family, and that is her son, Giovanni de' Medici. Bottom line is that we still have some of the same things going on, in that wealthy people are getting their portraits painted. And you can see by this time, just like in the High Renaissance, they really have a lot of the techniques for describing shiny cloth. This is probably some kind of velvet or some kind of satin dress. Pearls, it's got the shine going. It's got everything kind of going. The faces kind of look a little flat, not quite as realistic as what we've seen. And if we would take this hand here and compare that to, say, the Mona Lisa, yeah. But at any rate, it's what we got. We have artists that are starting to increasingly, more and more, paint portraits of wealthy people, which kind of is an indication that wealthy people are gaining power. They're seen as much more important. They're in some ways on a status level with government officials, with royalty, with clergy. Not quite up to biblical status, but they're important, and they get their portraits painted. Bronzino, portrait of a young man. Now this is a lot more developed than the previous one. And you can see much more lifelike depiction of the hands, depiction of the gesture. Young man with a book. Wow, that's something too. Because I talked to you guys earlier about the invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg in the 15th century. And what we have here is that by this time, not everybody has books, but books start to become much more common. You still had to have some money and you still had to know how to read. But books, the invention of the printing press, there are scholars who talk about how that had changed European society, how it changed everything, that there was this kind of like the internet, if I could, where knowledge and information became much more accessible to many more people. And so this represents the information age of the 16th century. Sophonisba Anguissola, portrait of the artist's sisters and brother. A woman, talk to you about the emergence of women artists. I showed you that on Monday, and I showed you the National Gallery restoring one of her paintings, not Anguissola, but Italy. We have women artists. And they are, and you can see here, she is as accomplished as her male counterparts here. She does understand how to do fabric, the folds. It looks like there is actually an arm inside that sleeve. The puppy, particularly cute. So anyway, the emergence of women artists. Giulio Romano, Fall of the Giants from Mount Olympus. So this is right out of Greek mythology. But look what he's doing here. He's really taken the idea of creating different kinds of spaces, the gods in the clouds, Mount Olympus, and here they are. The columns are breaking, the sky is falling, the people are, and check the scale. Check the scale of this. There's a doorway. This is huge. It doesn't really give you the dimensions here, but trust me. And so that is an outgrowth too of the High Renaissance. As I showed you with the Mona Lisa, they were able to invent landscapes. And once you figure that out, you can create whole dimensions of space and place. Another great Mannerist painter here, Tintoretto, The Last Supper. Think about this. This is late 16th century. Think about this compared to Leonardo's Last Supper. Totally different. Totally different. And there's some things that go on here. You see, here's Christ, and he has the halo, the biggest and brightest halo, but it's not the same kind of way this would have been depicted 100 years prior. And he has angels in here, but they come in the form of spirits. So you can see right through them. You can see we have the chandelier, the light, and he's painting the rays of light coming from the lamp. And he has the table, not parallel to the picture plane, but something that recedes in the distance. And if you count the figures in here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, you know, you got a lot of people and a couple more back here. So the Last Supper is not just confined to Christ and the apostles. And so here we go. We have the washing of the feet going on here. We have people serving food, not just simply bread and wine, but there's really a lot going on here. And so, what does that mean? It means they're inventing new ways of depicting the same images that have been depicted for centuries. And again, mannerism. And again, this is the center of the composition, and Christ is just a little bit off center, dynamic, all kinds of things. Veronese, Christ in the House of Levi, which is really kind of an interesting painting here too. And I'm thinking that part of this is cut off. I'm really sorry to see that there's actually a level underneath here. But in this painting, the architecture itself becomes at least equally important to the depiction of Christ. And here's some more Veronese, the Triumph of Venice. And again, like I say, if you know how to invent landscapes and you know how to invent deep space, you can do all kinds of things. Correggio, Assumption of the Virgin. It's on a ceiling. It's at the Parma Cathedral. And you look up and you see this, and he has quite effectively given us the illusion of high space going up through the ceiling and into the heaven. The Assumption of the Virgin, that's when she goes to heaven. The angels come and bring her to heaven, according to the scriptures. And so, again, here's some sculptors of the 16th century. We still see Salt Cellar, Francis I. Or Cellini. And again, this elongation for purposes of beauty. Whoa. Abduction of the Sabine women, right out of Greek literature, Greek history. Whoa. And again, the gesture. And late 16th century architecture, as you notice, it's much more clean. You lose the spires, this idea of the nexus mundi, which means a connection between heaven and earth, doesn't happen. We see architectural motifs like this, which the archways that come right out of classical Roman architecture, and you see a lack of ornamentation and an emphasis on proportion, rationale. And see over here, this is all mathematically the garden area, all put out. Mathematical proportions. You see that's going on here. It's all geometric. Again, courtyard of the Palazzo del Te, looking southeast. And again, not a lot of ornamentation. Got your columns, references to antiquity, but all of this, man is the measure of all things, everything in proportion, everything orderly, the rational mind of the 16th century European. And this is in Venice. Venice is kind of a little bit of an offshoot because they still a little bit more into their ornamentation, but still some of the same ideals. Villa Rotonda. We'll talk about later how these kinds of buildings actually come right out of ancient Rome, and they appear, at least in a lot of respects, in America at the founding of the Republic. And if you'll take a look at this and you take a look at, excuse me, Monticello, you'll see some similarities with the dome, with the pediment, with the columns, and so on. Again, classic architecture. And this is that Nexus Mundi, the connection between heaven and earth. But and again, like I say, this is Venice. Venice is still on the keeping the ornamentation, at least to some extent. What you see in Florence and in Rome is much more austere. And this is in Rome, and this is what I'm talking about. Not just a couple of sculptures, IHS, symbol for Christ, proportional. And that's it. So that is okay. I'm gonna get something else here. Let me and I'll be right with you. I didn't forget about you. I gotta get to, there we are. Share screen options. And I want this. And now I gotta get that. Oh, please forgive me. It's taken me a little while here. Share screen. I'm almost there. And yeah, this is what I need. Let's see. Okay, can you guys see this thing that says library search?
I'll eat that sandwich.
Yeah, I can see it.
But at the same.
Okay, good. Because in order to get here, I had to kind of X out something here. So all right, well, good. Let me see, slideshow from beginning. And so, talk to you about mannerism. This is the second thing I wanted to talk about. I looked at your submissions for quiz 1, and I took note of all of the sources that you guys use, and I really didn't see much that came from the library. I saw a lot of Wikipedia. I saw some museum websites, and Art Story and a few other websites, but I wanted to show you the library search because this is important. This is something you're going to use as long as you're in school, period. And so let me get started with that. And so here it is. This is on a search engine. And I just typed in, as you can see, Maryville Library. Clicked on it and got this screen. It's a Bing search. And there is my Maryville Library. And this is the link. As you can see, it's purple. And I circle it. This gets you into Maryville Library. Clicking on that link gets you to this page. And you can see this is the address, maryville.edu/library. And so this is the library's homepage. And under here, so you can scroll on this page. Underneath that, I'll go back one. Whoa. And so you can see resources, help, and all that. And then we got down here. You scroll down here, and what you want to do is go full search. That's always a good place to start. That way you can get access to just about anything that's available. And you can add your filters after this. But you see, I did Mona Lisa, my example of the semester. Mona Lisa, click search, and you see it's on full search. And here is what I got. That's how you get into the library. And so, research starter, famous painting. Anyway, bottom line, here are the results. And you can see this is results 1 to 20 of 160,000, almost 161,000. Well, you don't really want to have that many results. That will take you a few years to get through. And I want you to see this over here on the left-hand side. Here are your limiters. Here are your filters. And it's full text, peer reviewed, available in Library Connect collection print books. And it has publication date. This goes all the way back to 1823 to the present. And so what do? Well, I'll show you. First thing I did was limit it to full text, because if it isn't the full text, I can't deal with it. Of course, full text will give you a bunch of stuff. A book, a video recording. It will give you all kinds of things. And so the second filter I clicked was the second one here, peer reviewed. So and you see what we haven't really reduced that number quite so much, but I mean, it's not 160,000, it's 16,000. Peer reviewed. Anybody know what peer reviewed means?
I think it means that like other students from Maryville already read the text for that specific option or uh, source and reviewed it.
Kind of. Oh, darn. Kind of, you're on the right track, except it's not students. It's scholars in the field. Can you guys still see this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. A lot of times when I change slides, it acts kind of funny. So thanks. It's scholars in the field. Now we use the same term, David, you're right on with that, because a lot of times you can take your papers over to the library and they'll have other students, especially like they'll have juniors and seniors, sometimes grad students, sometimes students that have been through this process to help you put your paper together. And that would be your peer review. But these authors are putting their research up for review by other scholars in the field. And so what you'll find most of the time is this: academic journals. And academic journals are always peer reviewed. And why would we ask for peer reviewed sources?
To like prevent bias or
Prevent bias is a good answer. Prevent bias, and there's something else with a B and an S. Yes, I'll leave it at that. BIAS or just BS, because in this day and age, people can write anything. What we're really trying to do is filter out any misinformation. You know, and so it takes care of bias, but it's actually trusted resources. And in academic research, there are a couple of things that are worthy of citing, of believing, of using in a scholarly paper. One is academic journals that are peer reviewed. The second is primary sources. And I didn't really put any primary sources on this. Probably more than anything, primary sources are really kind of hard to get, especially if you're an undergraduate student. But oftentimes, libraries, big libraries, have some of the original writings, some of the original documents you could find in a library, some of the original writings by Greek philosophers, say. Of course, they'll be 2,500 years old and they bring it out and you can't touch it, and the people there, it's in a controlled environment and they're wearing white gloves and stuff. If you ever watch History Channel, Science Channel stuff, you'll see how that actually works. But bottom line, primary sources are the original documents. That's what that means. But peer reviewed is about as close as we'll get at the undergraduate level. And so anyway, I went down through Mona Lisa and I got all of these. And you can see it's really kind of one thing or the other. I know it when I see it. Mona Lisa on the move, et cetera, et cetera. So I picked one. Oh, it's not on here. I skipped a slide. Anyway, I picked one, different possibilities of evaluating a work of art, a case study of the Mona Lisa. And so when you click on one of these, you get something like this. And it will have the authors, it will have subject terms, which is very helpful, so that if this is the kind of stuff you're wanting to research, if it fits in those categories, the subject terms, then you're in business. And they'll have here, which I circled, a description. And this is what this source is all about. It's from the Conservation, Science and Cultural Heritage, and it's volume 19, issue 1, pages 307 to 326 in 2019, publisher University of Bologna. And so I'll talk about this in a minute, but this is where you get all your information for your bibliography. But this will tell you what this is all about. The topic of attribution and authentication of a work of art is a well-known one and is currently the subject of heated debate. What must be highlighted is the importance of terminology used to distinguish the different degrees of certainty within the system of artwork attribution. And so they go on as an emblematic case. They'll evaluate the Mona Lisa. And it's interesting in that you can find out how they know what they know. And this is the article. See, I have these slides backwards. But how did I get there? I put another word on my search, provenance, which means we want to know the history. Provenance is the history of the work, period. And it is a history that includes who painted it or sculpted it, what materials did they use, why did they do it, was this a commissioned portrait, did the Pope want it on his ceiling, etc. Provenance. And then, like in the Mona Lisa, they keep going from time to time as the artwork changes hands through the centuries. The person that owned the Mona Lisa in the 16th century is not the same people that own it today. And in fact, it has a long history. That's the provenance of it. And so I put that on there, and that's why I ended up with this page. And that's here. And sorry for getting this backwards, but different possibilities. I refined my search, and this is what I got. It's in an academic journal, and it is about 15th century painting, blah, 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 blah. And you see that number has kind of gone down to 455. And if I put 20th century provenance, that would go down considerably too. The more keywords you put into your search, the fewer hits you'll get. But see, all I did was limit this to full text, peer reviewed, and I can even download this whole article. PDF, full text. Some of these are actually, you got to request it because there's no electronic version. Or in this case, it's on the web, but it's not available as a PDF. All you can do is, it's a read-only website. And you see here, 1975 to 2021, the idea of provenance. And I'll tell you a little story about the provenance. If we would talk about 20th century, the provenance of the Mona Lisa, actually it got stolen in the first decades of the 20th century. And nobody knew where it was for a while. And I'm sure that that is what this resource is about. And so I showed you that they had a description. Some of your hits will give you an abstract. An abstract is better than a description. We still have the same keywords, evaluating, research, work of art, and all this other stuff. And this has some of the same language, but it actually has some of the language right out of the article. And so this is called an abstract. And these become very important in that it saves you a lot of time. A lot of time from going through a lot of things. You can quickly read the abstract, and is it going to have what you're looking for? If so, fine. And so I got this kind of backwards too. The authors, the source, again, all of this is what you would use in your bibliography. And that is that. And let's see, we'll share this one. And so, any questions?
No.
No? And I put that's in the modules, library search. And so you can take a look at the whole thing, the headers on top that give you the URL, all of that stuff. But this is how you get authentic, reliable, trustworthy information. And I got to say that there were a couple of the sites, so you guys showed me that were really kind of basically blogs. And I that's why I asked you to do quiz 1, and that's why I asked you to do it in the way I did. I wanted to see how you guys do research and where I needed to start in showing you what to do. And so it's like 6 o'clock. And you guys don't have questions. And I got almost all of your quiz 1 in. If you haven't given me quiz 1, you may have to send it to me via email. And how about if we start talking about high Renaissance and mannerism, excuse me, in Northern Europe and Spain? We'll start with that on Monday. Presumably on campus, but you never know. Any other questions, any other comments, anything on your mind? Well, all right, I'll put this in the media gallery once I get it all buttoned up and converted and stuff too. So let me see, I got 12 participants and I just want to make a double check here of who I got. Let's see. Oh yeah, I got Natalie here. Good. Caught one. All right. Stay warm. Anybody building snowman?
Nah.
I am, but I got my granddaughter here, so she won't have school. Will snowman. All right. Well, I'll see you guys on Monday. Stay safe, stay warm, and we'll pick it up then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reagan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie.
So